At 3:51 a.m. at Kapustin Yar, Russia, the birthplace of Moscow's deadliest missile lines, intense underground fires raged deep within the facility. The site that once launched Oreshnik missiles into Ukrainian cities and boasted of its unstoppable power is now belching thick black smoke through its own ventilation shafts. Those very vents became Ukraine's delivery address. 3 weeks earlier, an Oreshnik had struck Dnipro at Mach 10 speeds. Russia called it an invincible weapon. Tonight, a swarm of low-cost unmanned aerial vehicles and 6 attack platforms answered that claim from as close as 700 meters. Before diving into the details, comment number 2 if you support Ukraine, number 3 if you support Russia, and number 4 if you love peace.
The shock is real, for you and for me. Here's exactly how they pulled it off. To grasp the feat Ukraine accomplished this night, rewind 3 weeks. A salvo of Mach 10 hypersonic missiles slammed into Ukraine's power grid and a logistics hub outside Lviv. The damage was severe. Yet there was no panic. Instead, Ukrainian forces traced the launch origin to one location, Kapustin Yar. The site had been hit before, but Russia kept retaliating with missiles. The conclusion was clear. Russia maintains a nuclear-related facility here. It remains invisible from space. No intelligence reports had flagged it. The only way to force Russia to expose it was to convince Moscow that an attack was underway.
Ukraine therefore deployed a decoy. 86 upgraded Beaver reconnaissance drones, each cheaper than a used pickup truck, launched from a secret forward position near Kharkiv at 10:30 p.m. They fanned out into 4 loose formations, penetrating Russian airspace from slightly different angles. Yes, you read that right. Their electronic signatures were deliberately made noisy. Flight paths were erratic. They mimicked a poorly coordinated Ukrainian harassment raid. Even as a weak assault, the sheer volume suggested a large-scale operation pressuring Russia. Radar operators at Kapustin Yar detected them from 20 minutes out. The base commander made a decision that seemed smart but proved disastrous. He ordered all sensitive components, fuel clusters, pre-launch guidance modules, irreplaceable Oreshnik maintenance parts, evacuated from surface bunkers to underground vaults. Meanwhile, Russia activated its full air defense grid. S-400, Panzer, and S-500 systems unleashed fierce intercepts. Panzer units locked 20 to 30 drones per second, firing non-stop like fireworks in the night. S-400 batteries launched long-range missiles to down swaths of UAVs. S-500 swept from farther out. Roughly 45 to 55 drones fell. Yet the massive, noisy swarm created radar data poisoning and localized white noise, forcing Russia to commit interceptors to surface threats and leaving gaps for the subsequent low-level Flamingo sweep. The moment vault doors cracked open, from heat vents, exhaust ports, and air shafts, a Ukrainian mid-altitude drone with passive infrared scanning captured anomalous heat plumes. A faint, unusual thermal signature emerged 12 meters 40 feet underground at the southeast corner of Hangar 105. The drone swarm operators tagged it instantly, coordinates relayed in just 90 seconds. Russia believed victory was at hand, but they had just handed Ukraine the precise address. Pinpointing Core Zero on thermal maps was one thing. Confirming the interior before committing 6 Flamingo B platforms on a 700-meter round trip was another. Ukraine's solution was elegant yet audacious. Concealed within the swarm were dozens of bird-sized micro-units that dropped free-fall seismic caltrops, embedding into the desert floor. Within seconds, they relayed vibration signals, steady mechanical hums from climate control systems, and chemical propellant chargers on standby. Russia kept firing Panzer C-1 in passive mode. It locked one micro-drone at low altitude and downed it mid-air. But in those final 4 seconds, the drone's onboard AI completed a partial structural scan of Hangar 105's loading bay and transmitted a 5.5-meter, 18-foot, blast-resistant steel door and 2 eastern exhaust ports. That was sufficient. Ukraine adjusted targeting in real time. Flamingo B platforms no longer needed to penetrate 9 meters, 30 feet of Soviet-era concrete. They only had to hit those vents.
Overhead, the remaining decoy swarm kept circling provocatively. Pantsir batteries burned through ammunition belts and missiles, each round costing Russia $100,000 to $200,000 to eliminate an $8,000 drone. Russia won every intercept, but its budget could not sustain the pace. By 1:15 a.m., the decoy force swelled to 140 as a second wave of reconnaissance and electronic warfare drones surged from the southwest. They flooded radar scopes with chaos, noisy signatures, erratic tracks, hundreds of contacts at varying speeds and altitudes. Kapustin Yar's displays overloaded. Operators drowned in over 200 target returns. Distinguishing real threats from clutter became impossible. Computers tracked everything, but humans began guessing.
By 1:28 a.m., Kapustin Yar's air defense sector entered what Russian doctrine calls data poisoning. A flood of valid radar returns overwhelmed the system, forcing simultaneous tracking of too many solutions. S-400 batteries covering northern and eastern approaches toggled between active and passive modes to shield guidance processors, a standard countermeasure. But it created brief 7 to 12-second windows without active low-level scanning at 150 meters, 500 feet. Right then, the campaign star, the Flamingo drones, skimmed at just 55 meters, 180 feet. They had breached the outer defenses, but Ukraine had only hours, perhaps less. Operators fed target data to the Flamingo flight computers, refining priorities. Vents remained the primary breach point, but a secondary target, a fuel line junction, identified from 3-day-old satellite imagery, rose to equal priority. Destroying both would collapse the entire launch cycle. The Flamingo missiles were 38 minutes from target. They flew in 2 staggered pairs, 90 seconds apart. Terrain following kept them locked at 45 to 55 meters, 150 to 180 feet, below every base radar's engagement envelope. The decoy swarm held course until targets locked. At 1:47 a.m., all 140 second-wave drones simultaneously nosed over, accelerating toward the perimeter like a localized meteor shower. Ukraine pushed intensity to the maximum. Interspersed were dedicated EW platforms, modified drones with high-sensitivity jammers. As they dove, they unleashed a digital stun grenade across the base's frequency spectrum. Facing a radar screen 90% white noise, the Russian commander issued a desperate order: fire everything.
Pantsir S-1 batteries, the close-in gatekeepers, unleashed walls of lead and fire. It was humanity's most expensive fireworks display. Each Pantsir locked 20 to 30 drones per second, vaporizing carbon fiber frames mid-air. The problem? The swarm was too vast. Even with S-500 Prometheus joining from the perimeter, launching long-range interceptors at presumed high-value targets, 70% of Ukraine's decoys remained active. They did not evade, they occupied space. Every second a Russian radar locked an $8,000 beaver was a second it ignored the real threat gliding over desert sand. Amid the blazing sky, a specialized drone subgroup executed a maneuver so precise it would make a surgeon envious. 12 hawk-sized micro-drones broke formation. They dove toward the previously detected high heat signatures near Hangar 105.
Passing the underground entrance, they released seismic caltrops, tungsten-tipped sensors embedding 1 meter, 3 feet, into compacted soil. Vibration data streamed back to Kharkiv instantly. AI analyzed frequencies, not truck engines or heavy footsteps, but high-frequency liquid fuel pump whine. Confirmation of Core Zero. Ukraine sought no Chernobyl-style catastrophe. Too messy, too risky. Instead, it targeted the Oreshnik system's Achilles heel, propellivides and automated assembly chain.
Cut the fuel supply, and missiles become expensive decorations. Sever the assembly line, and the facility becomes a mere cave. Seismic data revealed secondary vibrations. Massive underground cooling system power draw. That became the target. Disrupting cooling lines would spike internal temperatures, triggering automatic safeties and rendering remaining Oreshnik missiles on racks useless. These weapons rely on ground inertial updates pre-launch. Destroy a link, and the unstoppable Mach 10 becomes a multi-million-dollar paperweight.
Tension in Ukraine's command center was palpable. The decoy swarm depleted rapidly, now at 40%. Russian defenses finally recalibrated, clearing the digital fog. The master clock flashed, 43 seconds until total swarm neutralization. The curtain was falling. If Flamingo missiles missed in the next minute, S-400 radars would revert to low-level scan, shredding the Flamingos before they glimpsed the hangar. At 1:52 a.m., the final decoy vanished, a burning wreck on the sand.
But then the S-400 radar, freed from digital poisoning, swept the horizon again. Screams erupted in Russia's underground command. 8 low-altitude signatures, 19 kilometers out, vectoring toward Hangar 105. The FP-5 Flamingo B missiles were unmasked. At 30 meters, they streaked at steady 965 kilometers an hour, gliding over sand like carbon fiber sharks. The Russian commander had no minutes, only seconds. He bellowed orders to Pantsir S-1 crews. Fire! The desert night became a curtain of tracer rounds. 30mm cannons poured storms of lead to erect a steel wall before the base. Impacts. Leading Flamingo caught 30mm fire. Its dense Torpex warhead detonated prematurely, igniting an enormous orange fireball that lit the valley for 3 seconds. 1 down. Seconds later, a panicked short-range Russian interceptor grazed the second Flamingo's wing. It wobbled, its autonomous brain compensating before slamming into a dune 730 meters, 800 yards from the perimeter. 2 down. In Kharkiv control, the mission commander's heart clenched. He tracked telemetry from the remaining 6. They were now just over 6 kilometers, 4 miles, out. Russian S-400 desperately hunted locks, but the Flamingo flew too low, exploiting desert heat reflection and terrain-hugging radar to blend into ground clutter. The Russian commander ordered a final, desperate gambit, physical blockade. Heavy trucks raced to block the hangar doors. Smart if Flamingo targeted entrances, but Ukraine thought in 3 dimensions. Less than 1 kilometer, 1,000 yards from impact, the remaining 6 Flamingo executed a pop-up. They jerked nose up, climbing to 90 meters, 300 feet for a vertical dive. Pantsir shredded the sky. The third Flamingo vaporized at apex. 3 down, yet 5 pressed on, locked onto the base's lungs. The lead pair struck Hangar 105. This was double tap in its purest, most brutal form. The first missile shape-charge warhead slammed the main vent. Using the Monroe effect, it focused molten metal jet slicing through 4.5 meters like a hot knife through butter. Before dust settled, precisely 500 milliseconds later, the second Flamingo B flew straight into the breach. It was like using a pilot hole before driving a structural screw into century-old oak. The second detonated deep in the main assembly hall. Chain reaction ensued. 90 kilograms of HMX explosive triggered moving liquid propellant lines amid panicked Russian evacuation. From the surface, Hangar 105 shuddered. Then pressure inside Core Zero tunnels found every exit. Massive blue-orange fire columns roared from elevator shafts and vents, soaring 120 meters skyward. Inside the underground birthplace of Oreshnik missiles, temperature spiked to 2,000 degrees C. The sole automated assembly line on Earth capable of building Putin's invisible weapon melted into slag in seconds. In a final act of desperation, the Russian commander screamed to launch remaining Oreshnik. Retaliate! Fire everything! But the base brain was dead. Underground fiber optic cables melted. Launch control computers charred. One Oreshnik tried to ignite in its silo, but with cooling and ground guidance gone, it stalled. The giant missile simply sat in its tube, venting toxic smoke, a multi-million-dollar monument to a failed military doctrine.
Back in Moscow, key figures who once felt secure in bunkers watched live feeds in stunned silence. They had been told Oreshnik represented Russia's future power. Tonight, they saw that future defeated by a $100,000 Ukrainian invention. Hangar 105's assembly buildings were not merely damaged, they were structurally destroyed. The specialized line, Russia's only one handling volatile liquid propellants for Oreshnik, now lay in blackened steel and rubble. The 2026 mass production schedule shifted from acceleration to years of backlog.
All launch preparations at the site halted. Personnel evacuated. Moscow's hypersonic threat transport system froze. It was as if someone deleted Amazon Prime from Putin's phone. You could see the catalog, but order nothing. Now the big question for you, what do you think Russia's next move is? Will they lash out desperately or stay quiet while rebuilding their invincible image? And if you were Ukraine's commander, where would you strike next? Vents or fuel depot? I want your tactical analysis in the comments below.
In yesterday's video, we asked, to retake territories Ukraine reclaimed last week, how many Russian lives per square kilometer? The correct answer was B, over 150 soldiers per 1 kilometer square. That's the costliest exchange rate since Bakhmut, yet bitterly, Ukraine retook it all in just 7 days. Now, today's question. At an average loss of 1,000 troops per day, how much extra does Russia pay daily just for death benefits per Kremlin commitments? Answer A, about 10 million per day. Answer B, over 120 million per day, excluding equipment replacement. Drop your answer in the video comments. The correct one reveals in tomorrow's video. And don't forget, comment number 2 if you support Ukraine, number 3 if you support Russia, or number 4 if you love peace.